Yes, it's certainly captured people's attention and has done a great job in selling copies of the Manx Independent, which...
But there's a certain amount of truth in it, though.
There is some truth in there, absolutely, yes. It's picked up some technical information that was released under freedom of information, and we all know there's been some cracking issues on the promenade. The difficulty is the article doesn't really make it easy for people to contextualise the issue and to understand the scale and impact of it. So, a bit of a concern that actually people will feel that this is a bigger issue than it really is.
Well, there's a letter here as part of that Freedom of Information request from Geoffrey Robinson sent to Burroughs Stewart, associates who designed, I think, the railway side of things, and it says the cracked concrete is aesthetically unsatisfactory, but there is also a risk to the long-term durability of the tram corridor. That's pretty damning, and that's from your department.
That's sent to the designer, who obviously designed the solution. The Freedom of Information report it was prepared for the contractor, and we've got three parties in this arrangement to refurbish Douglas Prom. We've got the department as the client, we've got the contractor Aldin Construction, and we've got the designers. And for this particular aspect, which is the rail corridor, that's specialist expertise.
But you're all arguing against yourselves here, because the designer to the contractor says failure to protect the concrete after pouring from wind and heat, and I could go on with more examples. So this is all going to end in court, isn't it?
No, it's not. I mean, we've all got the same interest here, which is to get the job done, to get the refurbishment completed, and to restore the Douglas Promenade into what it should be, which is an absolute shopfront for the island, as the DFA Minister said yesterday in Tynwald.
Where is the Minister, incidentally?
The DOI Minister.
Because he has ultimate responsibility, doesn't he, for this Prom project?
The DOI Minister does, but it's a team game, is this. And, I've got responsibility for highways. The Minister and I work very closely together. The Minister's got lots of other things. As a Minister, I mean, they'll have had combing this morning, I presume. I'm coming forward just because I'm available, and, it's my delegation. I understand. I've got the relationship with the Director of Highways, so I've had the conversation with him today to understand exactly how significant this issue is. We don't expect this to add length to the duration of the refurbishment of the promenade, and we don't.
Which is just as well, because we're already months behind.
We are, yes, yeah. Don't dispute that at all. And in fact, we're actually rephasing the work at the moment to try and mitigate the effect on the businesses on the promenade, in line with the feedback that they've given us, that they don't want landside work during the summer next season. So
are we going to have it all ripped up and repaired? What's going to happen then?
No. So the advice is that there is a cracking issue, but concrete cracking is not unusual. The situation that we've been suggested, the approach is to monitor it for a year or so, just to let it settle. Some of the cracks may develop into slightly bigger ones than they are at the moment. Others may just settle as they are, but that will allow that stabilisation period. A lot of them will be just purely cosmetic, and it's not great, to be honest, but there may be no need to do any further work on them. Some areas will actually need to be replaced, some of the concrete, but that's a relatively minor piece of work that can be done in amongst doing the rest of the work on the project. Now, you're saying that the contractor and the designer are pointing fingers at each other. Well, you would expect that, Tim, in any commercial situation, because clearly something's either gone wrong in the design process, or it's gone wrong in the way that the concrete's been laid, or a combination of the two. And ultimately, those parties will have to foot the bill for any work that's not up to quality. So, at this point in time, you're seeing part of the picture. You're seeing the contractor and the designer and the department just trying to work out how to move it forward. But the key message is this is a normal issue that arises in civil engineering projects. It'll be dealt with as contractual mechanisms to deal with that. We're all working collaboratively, and actually the approach has become much more joined up and much more collaborative as a result of having to deal with some of these sort of issues.
We've recently had our What Matters Most survey, And amongst many comments to do with infrastructure, I've picked two out. Government inability to commission and control the costs of large capital projects. And a second one here, DOI are useless. Too many projects they can't deliver. You can see why the public get this impression.
Yeah.
Department of incompetence was another.
That it's very easy to stand on the outside and throw rocks, and whether that's in the political arena or whether it's in the pubs or whether it's on social media, it's all very easy from the outside. The reality is these are complex projects.
Well, it's not going well, is it?
It could be going better, yeah. The Doulas Prom is stretching the island's capacity collectively. We've got a very well-regarded construction firm in Aldin who are arguably the best civil engineer, or one of the best civil engineering companies on the island, working on this project. They're being challenged by this. It is running behind.
Well, that's probably because he went for a 2-year project, isn't it? When a lot of advice was that you were going to need longer, unless if you did it in 2 years, you were just going to create a mess.
The challenge with this is managing people's expectations, and you go back to the Tynwald debate in November, and you had one of the constituency MHKs saying you need to slow it down. You had one of the members of Treasury saying you should be going a lot faster, and you had the other constituency members saying you should never have done it like this in the first place. You should have shut the whole promenade for 9 months. Well, interesting to contemplate.
Well, I go back to this comment. Government has an inability to control large capital projects.
Well, what we need to remember is that this is a project that is being commissioned and delivered by a private sector contractor here. So this is government working with the private sector to deliver this.
Isn't that half the problem, though, that it does seem to be when you go out to third-party projects, that's when you have issues. DOI doing their own work seems to work.
I think it's easier, yes, and the model that was moved to in the reaction to the VAT issue several years ago was to effectively reduce the resources in-house and go a bit more reliant on contractors. Now, I think...
Was that the right decision?
Well, it's very easy to sit here 10 years later and say, should have done this or shouldn't have done that.
Well, we're getting the evidence.
I think on something like this, I think it would always have been necessary to use private contractors, whether from the Isle of Man or whether from further afield, because of the scale of the project, and it is stretching our capability as an island community. So this isn't about government. It's not about Aldin Construction. This is about the island's ability at a time of full employment, at a time where there's lots of other construction projects going on, to actually get work done. And we know in many business sectors there are challenges around getting skilled workers in, and I think we're just seeing that here. But the headlines suggest that this is all going pear-shaped. It's not. It's challenging. It's difficult. Civil engineering projects of this scale are challenging and difficult. We're working together to sort it. The cracking issue, yes, it would have been great if it hadn't occurred. It'll be dealt with. It'll be dealt with through the normal contractual mechanisms. It'll be fixed, and it won't have a major additional impact on the project.
I was just going to pick up on the timeline then.
Yeah.
When are we expecting to see now the finished promenade?
2021 is the dates that were being worked at the moment. That's
12 months. When in 2021?
Well, the reason I'm not going to answer that directly now, Tim, is because
you don't know.
No, I do know, but we've got a presentation next week on the 18th, where the rephased plans are going to be presented and talked through with the business community and local residents. It would be wrong of me to break news out of context, because actually what matters to people is how it's being managed through this period, what the impact on their individual businesses are going to be. So we're very mindful of the comments that have been made by businesses and residents and the constituency MHKs to try and mitigate the impact as best as we can. There are some fine detail things that we can do, and there's a charter going to be released next week, making some promises about the way that the project is being done, and that's reflecting feedback from the constituency MHKs. So we're going to have that. We're going to have the rephased plans, which will allow people to see what work is being done when. It's clear that we're listening to the feedback that we're getting. We're trying to communicate better. We've got a full-time officer engaging with businesses in Carl Miller. We've got the weekly Prom newsletter coming out that comes out in electronic form for people to sign up to see all the detail. It's challenging as this, but we're listening, we're working together, and we are making progress.